Hi, I'm Camille Mercer, and the last time I heard my mother say my name, like it meant something was over a decade ago, it was a Wednesday when the message came. Not an emergency, not even a warning, just a short phone call, dropped into my day like a pebble through glass. I'd just wrapped a second-round funding review for our AI diagnostics platform and was heading to my apartment when my phone rang. Mom, mid-sentence, mid-plans. Already sounding like I wasn't part of any of it. Camille, she said, listen, I need to ask you not to come this year. Theo's bringing someone very important to meet us, his new girlfriend. They're formal people, well-connected. It's just easier if things are smooth. I stood there, keys still in my hand, jacket still zipped. Easier was a word my family always used when they meant invisible. I asked her if I'd heard that correctly, that she didn't want me home for her birthday, that she was essentially uninviting her daughter because, what? I was too difficult to explain. There was a pause, then a sigh. You do amazing things, Camille, of course, but you know how you are. It's complicated. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for clarity. I just listened as she thanked me for understanding, then hung up like she had just asked me to pick up milk, not to sit out of her life. The thing is, I had cleared my schedule for that weekend. My team knew I was flying out Friday morning. I had even ordered a custom lemon chiffon cake she liked, set to be delivered that afternoon. Not that she'd know, she never asked about my travel plans, or my work, or my life. I'd been sending money quietly for nearly 3 years, monthly auto transfers to cover her prescriptions, a dental implant she refused to tell Theo about, and even Eli's rent once, back when he needed time to stabilize. Never once had anyone in the family asked if I could afford it. Never once did they check if the business was in a stable quarter. They just sent over the figures, and I took care of it. Like a distant but reliable administrator they never invited to dinner. So when she told me not to come, I took a breath, logged into my banking app, and opened the Scheduled Payments tab. Click, Cancel electricity. Click, Cancel internet. Click, Cancel the health insurance line item I'd quietly set up after her last ER visit. The next morning, I got an email reminder for the cake delivery. I clicked cancel on that too. It wasn't vengeance. Not yet. It was just symmetry. They had quietly erased me from the picture. I simply stopped paying to be in the frame. That weekend, I didn't travel. I didn't send a message. I didn't post a filtered throwback photo with a soft caption like, "Celebrating you from afar." Instead, I stayed in my apartment, slept in, took a walk, brewed strong coffee, and lit a eucalyptus candle I'd been saving for a quiet weekend. At 5:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, power's out. Can you check it?" At 5:19, another. "Theo, Wi-Fi's gone. Ava's folks are on their way. Can you sort this out?" I stared at the screen. There it was again. The assumption that I would, of course, step in and fix it. That I would carry the load without being seen. Without being asked how I was. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because I finally realized when the only time someone calls your name is when they need a signature or a solution, they're not calling you. They're calling a service. Later that night, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a soft cardigan, watching the spring moon rise over the soundless street below. The air was brisk but calm, and in that silence, something began to break. Not my heart, that had already been quietly bruised over years of absence, disguised as politeness. What broke was the final thread that tethered me to the idea that one day my family would finally see me. I stopped waiting to be seen. I let the invisibility become space, and I decided that next time, if I was going to be visible, it would be on my terms. How many times can someone stay quiet before silence becomes a language of its own? The afternoon of my mother's birthday, Seattle was soaked in rain. A clean, persistent kind that made everything feel hushed and inevitable. I spent most of it reorganizing financial statements and sketching out a new structure for our clinical trial interface. It wasn't distraction, it was clarity. At 4:48 p.m., A FaceTime call buzzed through. Aunt Rosemary. She rarely called. Mostly birthday messages. A few check-ins after Dad passed. I hesitated but picked up, if only to say a quick hello. The screen flickered, and suddenly I was in their living room. Decorated in the usual way. Floral runners on the table. A cake with overly scripted lettering. Mismatched chairs pulled from the garage. In the corner, a phone was mounted to a stand, catching the whole room for what I assumed was a live stream to distant relatives. Rosemary smiled. Just wanted to say hi, sweetheart. You always work so much. Figured I'd pull you in. I hope that's okay. Before I could respond, someone behind her shouted, Claire, Liam's here. A small cheer went up. I watched as people rearranged, made room near the dining set, all eyes shifting toward the doorway. Theo entered first, hands shoved in his blazer pockets, like a boy trying to act like a man, followed by a tall, poised woman in a navy sheath dress and heels sharp enough to cut granite. Ava Shore. I recognized her from the Stanford Alum Registry and from the glossy interview her father had done last quarter about investing in the next generation of biotech disruptors. I didn't expect her to look so tense. She smiled politely as people greeted her, nodding through compliments, making the right noises, but her eyes kept scanning. She seemed to be looking for someone, something. Then her gaze hit the camera. I watched her freeze, just for a second, but in that single suspended moment, something in her face changed. She stepped forward slightly, squinting. Then, Dr. Mercer. The room didn't register it at first. They kept moving, chatting, passing drinks, but her voice had gone quieter, more reverent. I'm sorry, she said again. Are you Dr. Camille Mercer? A silence began to ripple. My mother, halfway through placing a tray on the table, turned around slowly. Theo's face shifted from confusion to something like panic. Ava blinked hard. You were on our investment panel last fall. You ran the ethics breakout. I was interning under Shore Plus during due diligence. I didn't realize. Theo took a step forward. Wait, Ava. You didn't tell me your sister was that Camille Mercer, she said, her voice now loud enough for everyone to hear. There it was. The air left the room. Not with an explosion, but a hollowing. Like someone had taken the core out of the evening and left the shell behind. I didn't smile, didn't nod. Hope the event's going well, I said quietly. Then ended the call. Not a dramatic exit, just a clean cut. For the rest of that evening, I didn't open my phone. I knew the messages were coming. The explanations, the excuses, the gasps from relatives who had once leaned in at Thanksgiving to ask if I was still doing something with computers. Instead, I lit a candle, took a long shower, made pasta, watched an old black and white film, and laughed when the protagonist threw a drink in a man's face. Not because it was funny, but because, for once, someone did it in real time. My phone didn't stop buzzing. I turned it face down. By morning, the storm had arrived. At 7:18 a.m., the first message came through. Not from Theo, not from Ava, from my mother. Nicole, I don't appreciate what you did. That was not the time to make a scene. A scene. I read the sentence 3 times before I could decide how I felt. Scene. Like I had stood on the table and thrown a plate. Like I had screamed. Accused. Demanded. All I had done was answer a call. All Ava had done was recognize my name. The next message was from Theo. You really couldn't just let this day be about Mom? Then a voice memo from my mother. She sounded breathless, emotional. You could have come quietly, or not at all. But this was showy. You humiliated your brother. She said nothing about the fact that I hadn't been invited. Nothing about the fact that they had intentionally omitted what I did. Who I was. That Ava, an outsider, was the first to connect the dots. It didn't matter that I hadn't orchestrated anything. In their eyes, the truth revealing itself was more offensive than the lie that had tried to hide it. That afternoon, I got an email confirmation from the HR coordinator at Shore Plus. Ava had withdrawn her internship. No explanation given, but I didn't need one. She had seen the web unravel, and unlike the others, she didn't try to patch it. She stepped away. In a quiet act of integrity, she folded the lie instead of stretching it further. Ever had the truth out itself, even when you didn't say a word? 3 days after the call with Aunt Rosemary, after Ava's quiet retreat, and Theo's angry messages, the noise finally stopped, not because anyone apologized, but because they realized silence couldn't be argued with. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told them, was that I wasn't alone in watching the unraveling. On Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived at my office. Not email, not text. A hand-addressed envelope with heavy cream paper and the Shore family crest embossed in gold. Inside was a note, short, sharp. Ms. Mercer, I believe integrity doesn't belong to age or title. My daughter made a choice I admire. Thank you for letting the truth stand on its own. Warmly, Elena Shore, Ava's mother. I had never met her. I'd only seen her on magazine covers and investment panels. Always poised, always gracious, but razor intelligent. The kind of woman my mother would kill to be seated next to at a charity luncheon. Enclosed in the envelope was an invitation. Spring Founders Salon, Shore Family Estate, Nantucket. I turned it over in my hands 3 times before setting it down. I wasn't sure if it was a warning shot across my family's bow or just something else. A gesture, a door opening that wasn't supposed to exist. I didn't RSVP. I booked a one-day ticket instead, quietly. The Shore estate sat like a museum exhibit off the cliffs of Nantucket. White stone, minimalist gardens, sea air cutting sharp through manicured hedges. The event wasn't listed publicly. No social tags, no press coverage, just a quiet gathering of people who knew exactly how much weight their silence could carry. And me. When I arrived, I expected polite nods. I expected to hover on the edges of conversation, the outsider with the wrong last name. Instead, the first person who greeted me was Elena Shore herself. She didn't ask for a photo. She didn't even comment on what had happened that weekend. She simply said, "Let's walk." We stood at the edge of the estate's bluff, watching the Atlantic roll and pitch. "I knew about you long before Ava connected the dots," Elena said. "Your product analysis from the Geneva trials caught my attention last fall. You think long-term. That's rare." I said nothing. "You didn't weaponize the moment," she added. "That's why I invited you. Not because of what you built, but because of what you didn't destroy." She glanced sideways at me. "Most people would have buried their family in public. They're not worth burying," I said. "They're not worth explaining." A pause, spoken like someone who's done the math. I allowed myself a slight smile. Elena turned back toward the house. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." The person waiting inside was not who I expected. It wasn't another investor, not a founder. It was Ava. Hair down, makeup gone, a blue wool coat draped over her shoulders like armor that no longer fit. She stood when she saw me, hands twisted nervously in front of her. "Camille, I didn't know she was inviting you." I nodded. "And I didn't know she'd invited you." There was a long pause, the kind that can turn into anything. An apology, a confrontation, a goodbye. But she surprised me. "I ended things with Theo," she said. "Not because of you, because I realized I was being taught to ignore what I knew was true." She looked down, then back up. "I saw how fast they turned. How quickly your mother erased you the second you didn't fit the picture. And I realized that could have been me if we'd stayed together." I sat down across from her. She added softly, "I don't want to be someone who stays for comfort and loses their compass." And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never really had been. It was about how people choose who they are, not based on family or image or obligation, but on what they will no longer be silent about. When I returned to Seattle, there were 5 missed calls from Theo. No voicemails, just silence on the edge of panic. Then a single message, "Did you say something to Ava?" I didn't respond, because I hadn't said anything. She had seen it all herself. And if that made him uncomfortable, then for once, he'd finally felt what it was like to be on the outside of a narrative someone else controlled. Ever had someone see through your silence and decide that was the loudest truth of all? I didn't plan to make headlines, but 3 weeks after the Shore Estate gathering, I woke up to my inbox flooded with a dozen alerts, all variations of the same headline. Pacific Biogenics taps Camille Mercer as Chief Innovation Officer. Not a rumor, not a leak. An official press release. 3 lines down, my name appeared alongside Elena Shore's as a private equity advisor. I stared at it for a long time, not with surprise, but with a cautious, deliberate stillness. I hadn't told anyone outside my immediate team. The announcement wasn't scheduled to drop for another week, but someone had pushed it live. Probably intentional, probably Elena. She never played coy. Not with leverage. By 10 a.m., LinkedIn messages had doubled. Recruiters, former classmates, ex-coworkers who had once smiled through gritted teeth now lined my notifications like unpaid invoices, suddenly calling to settle. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I closed the laptop and made tea. Jasmine, no sugar. The world may have finally seen my title, but my family? They saw something else. The first call came at noon. My mother. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Her voice was sharp, not angry but rehearsed. "Camille, your brother called. Something about Ava ending things. He's upset. You could have handled that better." I said nothing. She continued. "And now you're in the news, publicly. Elena Shore's company, that's not a small thing." Still, I waited. "You know people are talking, right?" she added, voice tightening. "We had to field questions at church." I let the pause stretch so long it became a mirror. Then I asked, "Did you call to congratulate me?" A beat, too. "You didn't tell us you were moving to Boston," she deflected. "I'm not," I replied. "Then why would they say, 'I'm on the board, I'm still based in Seattle'?" Another silence, then, "Well, that seems ambitious." It wasn't praise. It was a pivot. An uncomfortable reshuffling of expectations, now that I no longer fit neatly into the version of daughter she'd been reciting for years. "I have a call in 10 minutes, I said, gently but firmly. She sighed. "Theo's not doing well. He says you poisoned Ava against him." I raised an eyebrow. "Ava made her own decision. He just didn't expect to be seen without the spotlight." She didn't respond. Before hanging up, I added, "Tell Theo I wish him peace and clarity." Then I ended the call. That Friday, I received a certified letter addressed from my parents. Inside, a formal request for monthly assistance, not phrased as a plea, framed as an opportunity. "With your current position and income, we hope you can contribute $2,000 monthly toward household support, given Claire's ongoing transition." Claire, my younger cousin, the one who had failed her nursing boards twice and was now trying out freelance content work, living in their guest room, posting wellness affirmations while missing deadlines. I read the letter twice, then placed it on the counter and poured myself another cup of tea. This time, I didn't feel rage. I felt detachment, the kind that comes when you realize the requests were always coming. It was just a matter of when they stopped pretending it was about love. I drafted a response, short, unsend. If the first thing you say after seeing my name in the press is a financial request, perhaps the problem isn't that I left. It's that I finally stopped apologizing for staying. Instead, I wrote a check for $1 and mailed it back with a sticky note, "Contribution provided. Amount reflects emotional interest over time. Let them interpret it however they wanted." The irony arrived the next morning. Claire called me, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to ask for a job. Said she'd seen the articles, that she was thinking about biotech now. Wanted a foot in the door. Her tone was light, performative. like she was playing the part of a humble striver. I listened quietly as she pitched herself with phrases like team player and passionate about innovation. Then asked if there was a coordinator or assistant spot open just to get started. I paused, then replied, Claire, I think it would be uncomfortable for both of us. A pause. Oh, she said, voice suddenly brittle. Not personal, I added. But this isn't a bridge you walk toward, it's one you lit. She didn't respond. 2 hours later, a message came from my mother. Claire is devastated. She just wanted a chance. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then replied, So did I, but I wasn't born with it. I built it, alone. That evening, I sat by the window as rain swept in across the sound. Not triumphant, not bitter, just clear. For years, I had moved quietly, hoping my consistency would one day earn me a place at the table I was funding behind the scenes. Now I'd built my own. And when people knocked on the door, not to see me, but to ask what they could take, I had learned to answer in silence. Not everything broken needs fixing. Not every call needs answering. And not every apology comes before the consequences arrive. Monday started like most. Quiet inbox, overcast skyline, and the subtle rhythm of espresso brewing in the break room down the hall. But by noon, the rhythm cracked. Ava called. Not a text, not an email, a direct call. She hadn't reached out since the Shore estate. We'd left things clean, respectful, unfinished in a way that didn't need correcting. So when I saw her name, I answered. Hey, she said. Her voice was low, not shaky, but strained, like someone trying to read through a fog. I debated calling you, but something came across my desk. I thought you should see it. She forwarded it before I could ask. A PDF file titled Strategic Partnership Prospectus, Theo Mercer, Synertech West. I opened it. And there it was, my brother's name, on the executive summary of a biotech startup claiming early-stage behavioral diagnostics research. The pitch? A novel predictive care model, rooted in neuropattern analysis, co-conceptualized with past collaborators. Collaborators, not co-founders, not engineers, a gray zone term. But the model, it was eerily similar to the initial neural mapping project I'd submitted to Pacific Biogenics 3 years ago, rejected back then for being too ambitious for short-term ROI. The data set, the behavioral triggers, the logic trees, all recognizable, bent, repackaged, but mine. My breath caught low in my chest. Theo hadn't just borrowed an idea, he had stolen it, polished it, then scrubbed the name attached to the original submission, mine. I stared at the file, then at Ava's text. They pitched this to Shore Ventures last week. My mom flagged the overlap, thought it looked familiar. My hands went cold. Because Theo hadn't just stolen an idea, he'd tried to pitch it to the very circle I'd earned my way into, assuming, probably, that the people who once dismissed me wouldn't remember my work. He was wrong. That afternoon, I didn't answer calls, didn't text anyone back. Instead, I pulled up the original time-stamped submission, opened my archive, compared code fragments, internal drafts, pitch decks, side by side. It was obvious. One was raw, original, mine. The other was dressed up in buzzwords and glossy projections, but structurally, undeniably, the same. I knew what I could do. I had receipts, legal leverage, and a direct line to every person they were planning to court. I could destroy the pitch in less than 24 hours. But that wasn't the question. The real question was, did I want to? Because no matter how justifiable it was, this wasn't anonymous theft. This was family, twisted, fragile, brittle as bone family, the kind that didn't think twice about stepping on you, but would accuse you of betrayal the moment you stood up. By 8 p.m., I received a message from Theo. Camille, can we talk? No apology, no explanation, just the soft echo of a man who knew I knew. I didn't respond. I needed clarity, not emotion. So I called Ava back. I won't go after him publicly, I said. Not unless he pushes it forward. But I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't think he understands what he's done. I don't even think he believes he stole anything. I almost laughed. Of course he didn't. He'd been trained to believe everything I created was communal, that my effort was family equity, a shared inheritance without acknowledgement or repayment. Not this time. On Wednesday, I walked into a closed-door advisory roundtable. Elena was there, along with two other investors from Boston and D.C. As we went through prospective portfolios, Synertech came up. Elena didn't speak immediately. Instead, she slid the summary file across the table toward me and waited. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Just one sentence. The source data isn't theirs. That was enough. She nodded once. The name was crossed off the whiteboard. Quietly, without fuss, no scorched earth, just a door quietly closed before it ever fully opened. The fallout arrived 48 hours later. Theo called again, then texted, then emailed. Camille, did you talk to someone? The firm backed out. No explanation, no follow-ups, just dead silence. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew anything I said would be twisted into accusation. Instead, I forwarded the email chain to my lawyer, asked for a formal cease and desist to be drafted, just in case Synertech tried to pivot the pitch elsewhere. A boundary, not revenge. A line drawn not to punish, but to protect what I had built from erosion by entitlement. That Sunday, my mother called again. This time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded tired. Camille, she said, your brother's falling apart. He doesn't understand what happened. Can't you just talk to someone? Clear it up. I exhaled slowly. Mom, he stole my work. A pause. I'm sure it wasn't intentional. It was polished, reworded, repitched. That's not accidental, but he's your brother. I know. You're supposed to help each other. I did. For years my voice didn't rise, but it didn't bend either. I helped in silence, when no one saw it, when it cost me everything. Now I'm simply done pretending my work belongs to anyone who feels entitled to it. She went quiet, then asked the question I knew she didn't want the answer to. So this is how it ends. And I replied, no, Mom, this is how it finally begins. Ever been asked to protect someone who never protected you? Some endings don't arrive like storms. They don't crash through the door or scream across phone lines. They slip in quietly, without apology or applause, and sit beside you like something that's always been true, but finally decided to speak. That was how it ended with Theo. No fight, no confrontation, just a string of unanswered messages that gradually stopped. The last one was short. I guess you've made up your mind. I hope it was worth it. I never replied, because what could I possibly say to someone who thought the only value in my silence was what it cost him when I stopped offering it? The office was quieter now, fewer emergencies, more intentional work. Ava had quietly introduced me to a partner in Seattle, a woman running a patient care analytics firm that had been looking to license AI models for neurobehavioral risk. We closed the deal in under 6 weeks. I didn't celebrate. I just worked, ate lunch in the sunlight, took calls without flinching, paid myself fairly, for once. And when I walked into board meetings, I no longer scanned the room to guess who'd pretend not to hear me speak. They listened, not because I raised my voice, but because I stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. One afternoon, I received a letter, not an email, not a call, a letter on soft cream stationery. It was from my mother. Camille, I'm not writing to change your mind. I know you're far beyond that now. I'm writing because I realized something during all this silence. I raised a daughter who didn't need me to approve of her in order to survive, and I never made peace with that. You were always steady, always capable. I mistook that for strength that didn't need softness, but it did, and I failed to offer it. Your brother's loss was avoidable, but so was mine. I hope, in time, you'll let me know who you are again. Not for the family, just for you. Mom, I sat with the letter in my hand for nearly an hour, and I felt nothing bitter, just the quiet understanding that some people won't see you until you remove yourself from their view entirely. Spring arrived late that year. Boston thawed slowly, like a city cautious to trust warmth again. And on one rare afternoon between meetings, I walked past a park I used to visit when I was broke and overworked, and chasing my first trial run of the algorithm no one cared about yet. I sat on the same bench and watched two girls, no older than 10, argue over who got to lead their imaginary expedition. One of them finally said, "Well, I made the map." That was enough. She stepped forward, not mean, not loud, just certain, and the other followed. I didn't know them, but I smiled, because I recognized the moment. Sometimes, being the map maker doesn't mean you win the credit. It means you know the way, and you walk it, whether anyone follows or not. A week later, I hosted a workshop for early-stage founders at a local accelerator. Nothing fancy, just 8 women around a conference table, with coffee, laptops, and exhausted hope in their eyes. One of them asked, "How do you know when it's time to stop proving you belong and just build without permission?" I told her the truth. When you realize the people you're trying to impress aren't even paying attention, that's when you stop knocking and start designing your own door. They nodded, not performatively, but with the kind of understanding that comes from finally hearing what you've been trying to name for years. That night, I returned to my apartment, lit only by the warm flicker of a floor lamp and the soft hum of streetlight against the window. There was one new message on my phone, from Ava. Tandem One's team asked who wrote the Shore Pitch Logic. I told them to reach out directly. I didn't respond right away, just sat there, holding the moment in both hands. This was what healing looked like. Not applause, not revenge, just truth, no longer explained. Looking back, I've learned that sometimes the loudest boundary you can set is silence. I spent years trying to earn love by being useful, by staying small, by cleaning up messes no one apologized for. But the moment I stopped explaining myself and started building on my own terms, that's when everything changed. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stop handing your worth to people who never asked how you were doing. Have you ever felt like the strong one in your family? What would happen if you stopped playing that role? And if you want more stories that speak quietly but hit deeply, subscribe to the channel. You belong here.